Yeah. All right. So as we kind of get started tonight, everybody can see the PowerPoint okay? It's full
Yes.
screen. All right, great. So this week's the letter of Jeremiah, talking about the faithfulness of God. So what we'll do is we'll look at the Bible Project overview. It's actually the latter half of the Baruch one. I just kind of cut it up to kind of watch it that way. So yeah.
Around the same time as the scroll of
Everybody hear it
Baruch, a
okay?
text called the Letter of
Yes.
Jeremiah was written. It's actually a separate work, but in some ancient manuscripts, it was attached as a final chapter of Baruch. This letter was also inspired by the prophet Jeremiah, who regularly warned Israel against giving their allegiance to idol gods of the nations. In fact, Jeremiah even made fun of these idol statues, calling them worthless and lifeless pieces of wood, metal, and stone. The anonymous author of the letter of Jeremiah took these passages from the book of Jeremiah and combined them with similar warnings against idolatry found in the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms. The result is a 10-point essay on the folly of treating human creations as though they can offer real security and hope and meaning in life. So, in this book, a later author is using Jeremiah's voice to write about idolatry, but this makes perfect sense. The lure of idolatry did not end in Jeremiah's time of the Babylonian exile. It actually got even more intense by the author's day after the Greeks had spread their culture, their language, and their gods all over the ancient world. The letter of Jeremiah renews the challenge of Jeremiah and all the prophets that God's people should offer their allegiance to the living and true God alone. While Baruch and the letter of Jeremiah were never considered part of the Hebrew Bible in Jewish or later Protestant tradition, they were widely read. Their Greek translations became very popular in the early Christian movement, and so they became part of the Deuterocanon collections in the Roman Catholic and Orthodox traditions. These books are beautiful examples of Jewish literature from the later period of Israel's Second Temple. Their authors were immersed in the scriptures and produced these creative restatements of biblical faith for later generations of God's people who faced similar struggles. The Babylonian exile became a symbol for life under these later Greek and then Roman empires that were just as corrupt and oppressive. And so these books led Israel back to their scriptures to learn once again how to confess and repent and trust that God would bring the great restoration when his kingdom comes on earth as it is in heaven. And that's what Baruch and the letter of Jeremiah are all about.
Okay. So, you hear anything that was interesting in the video? Anything you learned?
Mhm.
No, it was boring. We should have skipped past it.
No, I think that struggle has been there for always.
Yeah, I have to. I was thinking, same old song, different verse. It
Mhm.
seems like they're constantly being tempted or whatever. And the Israelites are constantly failing, I guess, in some ways, or some of them, not all of them, I guess. But and it's like, when does it stop?
Herman, when's it stop?
Well, I think it's cycles, There's a reminder, so you course correct, and then in time you kind of stray and then you need course correction again.
So it's like all the time, forever.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Forever.
yep.
All right. So let's as we continue on, we're going to actually look at it's not very long. We're going to look at the entire letter of Jeremiah. Did anybody have a chance to read it ahead of time?
Yeah.
Did. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon's king, will bring you as prisoners to Babylon because of the sins that you've committed in the presence of God. When you enter Babylon, you will be there a long time, as long as 7 generations. Afterward, I will bring you out from there peaceably. In Babylon, you will see gods of silver, gold, and wood paraded on the Babylonian shoulders. These gods inspire awe among the people. Be careful that you don't become like the Gentiles, letting fear of these gods grip you, especially when you see large crowds of people walking in front of and behind them, worshiping them. But say to yourself, Lord, we want to worship you, for God's angel is with you, examining your souls. A carpenter smooths out the tongues of the idols. They're covered in gold and silver, but they are fake and unable to speak. The Gentiles take gold and put crowns on their gods' heads, like a young girl playing dress up. Sometimes the priests secretly take away the gold and silver from their gods to spend on themselves and to give to prostitutes in brothels. The Gentiles dress these gods of silver, gold, and wood with clothing just like people. But these idols can't be rescued from rust and rotting. Even though the idols are dressed in rich purple clothing, the Gentiles have to wipe off the idol's face because of the dust in the temple that thickly covers them. One idol has a royal staff, like a person who is a regional judge, but the idol can't destroy the person who offends it. Another person has a dagger or an axe in its right hand, but it can't defend itself from war or robbers. Clearly, they are no God, so don't be afraid of them. Just as a person's utensil is useless after it's broken, so are the Gentiles' gods after they've been placed in their temples. Their eyes are full of dust from the feet of visitors. Even as the courtyards are locked up on every side when one is sentenced to death for doing wrong against a king, so the priests secure their temples with doors, bolts, and bars from the robbers and thieves. The priests light more lamps for idols than for themselves, but their gods can't see them. The idols are just like the beams that support a house, but people say that their hearts melt before them. They don't notice when the vermin from the earth have eaten them and their clothing. Their faces have been darkened by the smoke that is in the temple. Bats, swallows, birds, and cats land on their bodies and heads. From this, you will know that they aren't gods, so don't be afraid of them. As for the gold they wear beautifully, the idols won't shine unless someone else wipes away the rust. They didn't have any feeling when they were made. They are purchased at a great cost, but there is no breath in them. Since they have no feet, others carry them on their shoulders, demonstrating their worthlessness to people. Their servants are ashamed, since the idols fall to the ground unless they study them and hold them up. If anyone stands an idol up, it can't move by itself. If one is tilted over, it can't straighten itself up. Yet gifts are placed in front of them, just as people place gifts in front of the dead. Their priests misuse the sacrifices by selling them and using the money for themselves. Their wives also preserve some of the meat, but they don't share it with the poor or disabled. Menstruating women and others who have just given birth have handled their sacrifices. Since you know from these things that they aren't gods, don't be afraid of them. Why call them gods? Because women place food before these gods of silver, gold, and wood? Or because the priests sit in their temples with their garments torn, with their heads and beards shaved and their heads uncovered? They howl and shout in front of their gods, as some do it at a funeral feast for the dead. Yet the priests take the gods' clothing to dress their wives and children. Whether one treats them badly or well, the gods aren't able to repay in kind. They aren't able to install or remove a ruler. They can't give either wealth or money. If someone makes a solemn promise and doesn't keep it, they can't enforce it. They can't save a person from death or rescue a weak person from a strong one. They can't restore sight to the blind or rescue a person in an emergency. They can't show mercy to a widow, nor can they do any good for an orphan. These wooden things covered in gold and silver are like stones from a mountain. Their servants will be humiliated. So why should anyone consider or call them gods? In addition, even the Chaldeans dishonor them. When they see a person who is unable to speak, they bring out Bel and expect Bel to make a sound as if it were able to understand. Even after observing this, the Chaldeans themselves are unable to abandon the idols because they have no sense. The women with cords wrapped around them sit along the streets and burn corn husks as incense. When one of these women is dragged away by someone to have sex, she makes fun of the one nearest her by saying that the other woman wasn't as worthy as she, nor has the woman's cord been broken. Everything that is done for the gods is phony. So why should anyone consider or call them gods? Carpenters and goldsmiths make them. They can be only what these designers want them to be. Their creators won't live long themselves. So how can the things that they've made be gods? These designers leave behind something fake and disgraceful for those who come after them. When war or disasters come, the priests consult with each other about where they may hide along with the idols. So how can one not grasp that they aren't gods? They can't save themselves from war or other disasters. After such events as this, the idols made of wood and covered in gold and silver will be recognized as fake. It will be clear to the nations and to the rulers that they aren't gods, but human creations. There's nothing divine about them. Who doesn't realize that they aren't gods? They could never raise up a ruler over a country or provide rain for people. They can't render a verdict in their own cases, nor can they save those falsely accused, because the idols are powerless. They're like crows between the sky and the earth. When a fire breaks out in a home of their wooden gods covered in gold or silver, their priests will run and save themselves, but the gods will be destroyed like supporting beams. The idols cannot stand up against kings or enemies in war. So why should anyone consider or call them gods? The wooden gods covered in gold and silver can't be saved from thieves and robbers who will take away the gold, silver, and clothing that the idols wear. They won't be able to protect themselves. It's better to be a ruler who has courage or a household than the owner can actually use than to be a fake god. The door of a house which keeps safe the things that are in it is better than fake gods. A wooden column in a palace is better than these fake gods. All right. So, as we move on, the sun, the moon, the stars are bright, and they willingly obey when given an order. Also, lightning is widely seen when it flashes and draws attention. The wind also blows in every land. When God commands the clouds to move across the whole world, they carry out the when the fire is sent out from above to destroy mountains and forests, it accomplishes what it is ordered to do. But the idols can't be compared with such forces of nature in appearance or ability. There's no reason at all to believe in them or call them gods. They aren't able to judge anyone's case or do any good for anyone. since you know they aren't gods. Don't be afraid of them. They can't curse or bless rulers. They can't show signs in the sky among the nations or shine like the sun or give light to the moon. The animals are better off than the idols, for they are able to run for shelter and help themselves. It's obvious to us that the idols aren't gods, so don't be afraid of them. As a scarecrow in a cucumber field offers no protection, so do their gods covered in gold and silver. In the same way, their wooden gods covered in gold and silver could be compared to a briar patch, where every bird perches, or to a dead body thrown out into the darkness. From the purple cloth and the marble that declays and crumbles on them, you will know they aren't gods. Later, they themselves will be devoured, and it will be a disgrace in the land. So it's better to be a righteous person without any idols. That person will be far removed from disgrace. All right. So, what does the letter of Jeremiah have to say about idolatry?
Not to be afraid of them.
All right, don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, that was repeated over and over again.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be
Can't do
afraid.
anything for you.
What's that?
Can't do anything for you.
Can't do anything for you?
Everything about them was negative.
Okay, everything about them was negative. Is everything about them negative?
Well, they have no power
They have no power.
and no ability. So, if something catches on fire, they can't go running away from it.
Mm-hmm.
They
But
have
they
no
do have
no
power.
agency.
People give it to them.
Say that again, Sue.
They do have power. People give it to them.
That's the one thing, as we're listening to this, I don't know where it was exactly. It was kind of like almost in the middle. There was a line sort of like, you fashion or you make gods like you want them to be,
Right.
or something along that line. And that, you kind of think and you ask the question, okay, if these gods are so impotent, so worthless, and all of that kind of stuff, why do people invest their time, energy, money, and all of that stuff in them?
Mhm.
That's what I was wondering the whole time you were reading it.
The Quakers sort of take this to an extreme and have no symbols at all. So the Quakers, don't have any kind of crosses, even though they're Christian. They don't have flags even in the church. And in a Quaker school, we don't have any. I mean, outside, we do have an American flag, one on a post, which is unusual for a Quaker school. But yeah, no symbols because of stuff like this, that they believe that the symbols are devoid of any kind of power, and so they take it to like an extreme of not even having them at all.
So let's help Mark answer the question. He was wondering why. Why do we have?
Why do we have idols?
Yeah, that's what you asked, right, Mark? Or
Yeah. Everything you were reading, I thought was negative. So why even have it?
I sort of think it was started out to fear mongrel people.
To say that again?
Fear, to make the people be fearful whenever this started with these gods. And then when you are born and raised around it, I guess it's almost second nature to you because you know no better. So then what do they say, Herman? Like if you do something long enough or say a lie long enough, you believe it. Isn't there something about that? There's a saying like that. If you keep, believing in a lie or say the lie, you finally believe it.
If you keep hearing something over and over again.
Yeah, yeah.
you
And
assume-
it's like, so then as generations came up, I mean, that's all they knew. So, but then you think, gosh, they're so smart yet so stupid.
Not exactly. So we need to believe in something that is greater than ourselves. So we need to how can I explain this? So if we strive for having something that is bigger than ourselves, it gives us more meaning and it gives us a sense of purpose. So if you have something of your own making, then it's like a false god, but it's something that you want or something that you desire. So it doesn't surprise me that if you have the structure of one God that is over everything, and then over time, you may not want to do what you're supposed to do for that God, but you want to do something else, and maybe you start, developing a an attachment to maybe a different figurehead, so that you can venerate that new creation that is more keen to your needs or your wants. So, for example, if you venerate the phallus, then that's where your whole um, focus is on. But if you venerate um, the little calf that is going to give you nurture and it's going to give you wealth and all those other things, then that meets your needs. Um, but that does not necessarily mean that just because you venerate those idols, that they're real gods. I didn't explain myself well.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
But then if it means so much to them, why don't they take care of it? I mean,
They did. They took care of them. They had priests and they had all this structure around them.
well, to a point, but one part of what he read said it was covered with all the dust.
Right.
Well, no, well, that doesn't mean it's filthy. It just means that when you walk into the place, your feet kick up dust and it gets dusty.
And it said that they had to dust them. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's that idea that this idols could not do anything for themselves.
Yeah.
When you compare to the Hebrews, uh, they had their God that was not an a concrete something that would gather dust or that would get tarnished or that needed clothing.
But he
or
got
the-
things done.
yeah, well, and this particular God could defend itself. You couldn't be in the presence of that God without dying, without without having the skill or the knowledge or the permission to visit with that God. So it was very different. I
Yeah,
think they're making that point of this idols can't do anything for themselves and they can't do anything for you. So it's more a representation of your needs and desires.
so it was okay then to steal the gold or steal the silver and give it to the prostitutes. That was okay. According to them, that was okay in that God's eyes.
I have no idea. So I guess you could take advantage of the situation.
Yeah. Wow. Hmm. And
A
if
lot of stuff still goes on, though.
what's that, Sue?
A lot of this stuff still goes on, especially in a couple of European countries, specific and Brazil, maybe Spain, Italy. some parts of northern France, for like Brittany, they do the whole parade with the Virgin, and everybody puts money on it,
Yep.
leaves gifts there, and
I was thinking of that in the crying statue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I lived in North Jersey for a long time, and southern Manhattan, and this stuff was going on all the time. There was always a parade of the Virgin or Saint Joseph or somebody, and everybody was out in the street having a great time, and it was fun, go and have zeppoli and sausage sandwiches and have a great time. But obviously, it was silly. It was just an excuse for a party in my view, but they were really, really into this. To me, it was just, hey, it's a good excuse for a party.
Mm.
Of course, there was only 3 Protestants in the whole town, so
Yeah.
kind of just went for the party.
I was just listening to a podcast, and it was a Catholic priest, and he was actually talking about idolatry, and he explained, but I didn't understand. He explained the difference for the Catholics, how they don't see it as idolatry in having these icons. But I guess the reading of the podcast was in the Old Testament was about idols, and he was explaining the difference. But I can't repeat it because I didn't quite get it.
Well,
I didn't see the difference.
yeah, I mean, and so I think, where especially with our Orthodox brothers and sisters, you go to an Orthodox church, there's a lot of icons.
Mhm.
So for them, an icon is some picture representation, that in some ways is, I think, as I understand it, is to do a couple of things. One is kind of, have you ever been, what's that church over there where they had the Greek festival with the
St. George.
yeah,
St. George is in media, right?
yeah, the one
No, it's in Newtown, Broomall, I mean.
yeah,
St.
Luke's.
St. Luke's.
St.
St.
Luke's, that's right. St. Luke's, St. George's. Yeah, you're right. St.
Yeah,
Luke's.
Saint somebody. St. George's Greek festival's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming up. But so have you ever been in St. Luke's?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so as you're in St. Luke's, what kind of impresses you?
It was all the icons and it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
You're
Yeah.
surrounded by them. And so in some ways, as you go into that space, it's almost as if you're surrounded by the saints. Okay. So in some ways, you come into that space, and you're coming into a place where you're surrounded by the saints. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in some ways, as you venerate the idol or what have you. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little muddy for me, is that what you're doing is not so much venerating the idol for the idol itself or for the person itself, like say Mary, okay? But venerating that person as a way and a conduit or a channel, to get into kind of the holy space and get into a place to worship God. Now, to me, that gets a little muddy. I don't understand it, because it's kind of muddies the water. But I think it's probably, for me, it's really cool to think about, being in a space and kind of just being surrounded. So as we think about this, then, we got this idea of idols. And in some way, is it inherent for us as human beings to worship idols?
Yes, I think it is. I think that's in us. We realize there's something greater.
Okay. Yeah, that's Herman. Herman mentioned that there's
Herman mentioned that in the beginning when he started.
Mm.
so if I think, okay, so there's this inherent tendency within us to seek out that which is greater than us. And as we seek that path, we're going to, maybe go down different paths until we find the one that leads us to God, the true God.
This makes me think of, this is a weird connection, but hear me out. So the Grinch that stole Christmas.
Oh, I love that.
So if you think about this, right? The Grinch thinks that the Who's are fixated on the tree and the presents and the roast beast and all of that stuff. And so he takes that all away, all of those things. And yet the meaning, they find the meaning in each other and the worship of, the God and just being in community. Right. So they've transcended the idol worship of the things, but he's confused by that. So I think that this letter sort of speaks to that there is something above all the things.
Yeah.
I think it does because the Israelites are going into a land for 70 years that it's going to be so completely different than what they had in the past that God's reminding them these idols aren't going to do anything for you. I did. I parted the sea. I gave you manna food when you were in a desert.
But as you think about that, that's pretty cool. But at the same time, as you think about the Israelites in the desert, okay, you have Moses that goes up Mount Sinai and he's delayed. And because he's delayed,
Yeah, form an
they,
idol.
they fashion an idol. Now, most of us would say, okay, they're fashioning an idol because, they're fashioning an idol that was an Egyptian idol or this other idol. If you actually read the scripture very closely, what they're doing is trying to fashion an idol or a representation of Yahweh.
Mhm.
Oh.
Okay. Because, when we think about, this, why, a statue, golden statue and all this kind of stuff, in some ways, what are we trying to wrap our minds around?
Some sort of representation.
We're trying to wrap our minds around God.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, we're trying to make God tangible.
Concrete.
What's that?
That was the word I was thinking. We need
Concrete.
concrete things.
Yep.
We have
Very
a hard
good.
time.
Yep, very good word. So you were trying to, we got this mysterious, and we got this, expansive God that, we really, if we're honest with ourselves, can't understand. And then what we're trying to do is reduce that God into something that becomes concrete and something that becomes a bit more relatable. And I would even say sometimes a bit more manipulative for us. And so I think, as we think about Mark's question, why, okay, in some ways, it's okay, Chris, it was that way for generation upon generation upon generation. So we don't question it. But, I think in some ways what we try to do, and this is from the beginning of time, is, try to understand God and in ways, sift out, you know, this, this God that we want to worship, and in some ways try to reduce God, to something that, like I said, is something we can see, we can touch, and we can worship. Now, as we think about that, we know that the God Yahweh is different. Now, is there an idol for Yahweh?
That I'm aware of.
Just the tabernacle.
No, tabernacle wasn't an
And
idol.
in the Catholic
It was
Church,
it was a box, but the meeting place of God was between their wings, between the wings of the cherubim on top of the mercy seat.
I'm almost thinking of where in the Catholic Church they keep the host.
Yeah, that's called the tabernacle. So think about it for a minute. Deb, you're going to like this one because guess where we're going?
Creation.
Back to the garden. And so, we typically think about the creation stories as, a cosmological explanation for us and God, right? Big fancy word, how things came to be. But in one way that you can look at the creation narratives, because there's a lot of temple language there, as, a way in which, a temple is built. Okay. And so, God creates and separates, and he creates spaces, right? And then after he creates the spaces, what does he do? He fills them, right? And in fact, if you think about, the Hebrew tabernacle, okay, you had you go in the holy place, and then you got the Holy of Holies. Okay. In the holy place, what is there around the wall?
Food, animals.
But there's lots of, it's big curtains with lots of pomegranates and all that kind of stuff, and leaves and all that kind of stuff, and it represents, the garden. And so as you think about the creation narratives as temple language, almost in a way, cosmologically building a temple, what's the last thing that's placed in the temple?
The priests,
Or what's the last thing that's placed in the garden? I'm sorry.
the people.
People. Okay, if you are, an ancient Near East person, and you build a temple and there's a 7-day feast and a 7-day celebration, what's the last thing that happens as part of that celebration, that 7-day feast?
The priest goes into the temple,
Yeah, and the
goes into the Holy of
God,
Holies.
the idol is placed in the temple. Okay, so in an ancient Near Eastern, temple inauguration, there would be a 7-day feast. The last thing that's going to happen is the idol is placed in, the temple. In the 7-day creation story, what's the last thing that's put in to the space?
Oh, the people.
Human beings.
Yeah.
And so I would posit it that in some ways, God chose human beings as his idol, as his, because I know you probably don't like that word, us as an idol, but idol strictly meaning a physical representation of.
Mhm.
And so in some ways then, the human being becomes the human idol, the human representation of God, because it says, and we hear this language when we talk about human beings. What do we say? That human beings are what? Made in
Made in
the
the
image of God, that human beings have received the Ruach, the Spirit of God within them. And
Mhm.
so, in some ways, that becomes the difference here. When you look at, an ancient Near Eastern temple, they have this idol that represents God, that's supposed to contain what this God is. But in the Hebrew temple, the container of God, if you will, is the human being. And so that's, when we think about, becomes the basis of, our, you know, um, understanding, our revering human life, it's because, human beings are the idol of God. Other thoughts?
Do we know when these gods first developed? Like what culture started them first?
Well,
What wasn't it the Israelis when they were in the desert?
No, no, no.
No, the old idol
The,
gods.
the idols have been there since the beginning of time.
Mm.
All over the world.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
yeah, since
I
the
think
earliest of peoples.
consciousness on some level. Humans, no matter, you can argue about or debate what came first, Eden or the Neanderthals or whoever, but I mean, we've always had a God consciousness. There's been Neanderthal burials found with flowers and tributes and jewelry, like they know there's an afterlife.
Mhm.
How they know it, we don't know. Did they, you know, the people that left the garden bring this along with them? We don't know. But it's there. Or is it always been in us?
Hmm.
That's I would argue that there's this innate
Mhm.
longing within everyone, as from the beginning of time, to understand, as Herman said, that there is something greater than ourselves, and we try to search that out. So if we're thinking about this text for a minute, what do we learn about staying faithful in a world full of distractions and idols?
Tough.
What'd you say, Sue?
It's tough.
Okay, yeah, it's tough. It's
It
tough.
can be.
Mhm.
It's interesting reading this text because there's so much like the idols can't do this, can't. And then there are bits and pieces, just like bits that pop in about, but God can do this. So remembering what God can do versus what these other things can't do is
Can't make
helpful.
the idols can't make it rain.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
There is a temptation around every corner.
Yes, there is. And so if there's a temptation around every corner, how do we shun those temptations?
By remembering, having reminders.
Okay.
They focused on God, trying to stay focused. It's not always easy, but trying to stay focused.
Yeah, well, so in some ways, then we spent a good long time, exploring Torah and the Pentateuch. And so, if we think about it, what did God, what kind of things did God give the Israelites? And so how were they sort of tasked, if you will, to remember?
By festivals and holidays.
Good. So all the festivals and holidays, each one that they have, and what are the festival and holidays? They weren't just time to go eat good sausages, right, Sue?
Yeah, especially not for these women.
Mm. But so what were the designs of these festivals?
They each had a
Remembering.
story, yeah, of God's faithfulness in the
Okay, yeah,
past.
so remembering their history. So in some ways, I would say that, it's important for the remembering the feasts, but probably what's the if you're thinking about it, out of all of these feasts, which one do you think the ones that is, excuse me, missed the most?
Missed.
What do you mean missed? Like they don't remember it
Yeah,
or
it's probably not as remembered as well as the other ones.
probably Sippath.
Think so?
Yeah.
I was thinking Sabbath.
Um,
Oh,
not well, I knew a lot of super Orthodox. Well, I knew a lot of super
Yeah.
Orthodox Jews, and I know a lot of super Reformed Jews. They try to keep the Sabbath, even the Reform guys do, but they don't do the booths. They don't do Esther. They might, treat it like Halloween.
Yeah.
They don't do a lot of things.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think that okay, I would probably say then what if we think about it, which one's the most challenging? Probably Sabbath because it's reoccurring every single week.
Uh,
And trying to remember. So we have the feasts that help us to remember. Um what else did God tell them? Were they supposed to wear tassels on their
Yes.
shirt? Okay, what were the tassels there?
For like prayer beads.
No, the tassels on the on the fringe,
Oh,
on the fringe. So if you ever see a Jewish person and you see four little tassels coming out the bottom,
Hmm.
okay, it comes from Torah, it comes from the Pentateuch. What was that there? There was a reminder. Okay, just like what did God say that you're supposed to wear the word of the Lord
on your
on your
forehead.
head.
on your forehead? So they took that to an extreme, and we have phylacteries. So we have phylacteries. And someone wear them here. We have these tassels that are designed to be physical reminders.
And the mezuzahs.
Yeah, all those kinds of things, but they're designed for physical reminders because you need those. Okay, so you have festivals, you have Sabbath, you have, these dressing things. What else?
sacrifice.
Okay, sacrifice.
Commandments.
Okay, commandments. So you have the law and you have the temple.
Mhm.
I think God said that, you need to teach your kids and bring them up in a tradition. But it said, what did it say? When you're out in the street, what are you supposed to do? Talk about the goodness and the work of the Lord. And so in some ways, if we read that scripture seriously, their whole lives, and they were looking for ways to bake in, these reminders to stay faithful. The Shema, I mean, you pray that, every all reminders of the presence of God, to be faithful to God. And so, what do we learn from this, or what could we learn from this? One of the ways I think we learn is that we have difficulty staying faithful because we don't have things baked in to help us to remember.
That's true.
And you think about the letter of Jeremiah. It was part of Baruch. Baruch was Jeremiah's scribe, and so these are written around the time of the exile. And so, what is one of the big challenges that we have here? Okay, we don't have a lot of these things anymore that are the physical reminders, and there's a danger that we're going to forget. There's a danger, and it looks like, hey, we're here in Babylon, what they're doing looks kind of cool. What they're doing looks pretty neat. Maybe we should do that. And, in some ways, here we have Baruch and this letter trying to remind them how they need to stay faithful. And probably the same words for us today. If as we do all of this kind of stuff, I also always want to say it's always nice to read this, but just for the sake of reading it. But all of this stuff has influenced the early church in the time of Jesus and Paul and those kinds of things. So if we kind of look at some of the other writings, so we have the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Bible. It was part of that. If you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, it was part of that. And then, this idea of idolatry was, grasped and, kind of talked about in the early church father writings. As most of these other books, they have influenced, the early Christians, but they weren't used in the same fashion as the Hebrew scripture that would be quoted, but there's a lot of allusion to them. And, a lot of, each Jesus and Paul had big critiques about idolatry, which, sometimes comes from this letter. If we look at Jesus teaching worshiping God alone, hypocrisy about worship, the idea of temple cleansing. Paul, if you look in Romans, talks about God and the glory of God and being immortal. First Corinthians talking about idols. Acts, where he has a speech in front of the Areopagus. So those kinds of things. So we have that stuff. And some for your own, we're running out of time, but if you wanted to, some cool things to do is read Isaiah and read Psalms and, compare and contrast them because, we tend to think about these books as, kind of other than, and in some ways, if you begin to look at our scriptures, here, the Hebrew Bible, we see how kind of in some ways they're interconnected, but we can do that. I think, if you kind of want to think about, what are the key takeaways here? Idols are powerless, but deceptive. And what happens in the, you seek out an idol and it's powerless. What ends up happening?
Disappointment.
And it kind of drives you kind of to move on and dig deeper and that kind of stuff. And so We don't like this idol, so we move on to that idol. We move on to this idol until our path leads us to God. If we look at this scripture, what does God desire? He wants our devotion. And, if we're going to be faithful, big word there, intentional focus, especially in a culture of distractions. So if you kind of think about next week, all right, next week we're going to be looking at, now this can be confusing because the book can go by 3 different names. Okay, it's sometimes see it the wisdom of Ben Sira. Sometimes you'll see it as Ecclesiasticus, not that other one.
Ecclesiastes.
Thank you. This is Ecclesiasticus, which is different, or sometimes it's also called Sirach. All right, so next week, hold on a sec. I think I can't be here next week, I think.
Is that the 13th? No,
No,
this
it's
October 6th.
the 6th. Okay, I can't be here next week because here, True Confessions, I was scheduled to teach 2 EMT classes. Guess what I didn't do last time because I forgot.
You didn't teach it.
Yeah, I was at home in sweatpants and watching the Phillies game, and hey, are you coming to teach? It's like, oh no. She said, forget it. But then she sent me 2 texts to remind me that I'm teaching on the 6th. So I won't forget.
Oh, good, it's not just me.
It happens to me all, and it was on my calendar too. So can't be here next week. It'd be the week after. We'll do
The week after that is the 13th, which is it's
Columbus Day.
Indigenous Peoples Day. I don't know if that I have off. I'm going to actually be in North Jersey giving a talk on cosmovision and observational astronomy in the mid 21st century.
Okay, you have at that.
I have a kind of historical question, and I honestly don't know if anybody here can answer it, and I sure as heck know that I can't. Why did the Protestant